If proportions are something you struggle with when you draw, then this is the video for you. I'm drawing directly in pen, which means that we have to have a certain confidence and accuracy and strategy of drawing where nothing can be erased at the end. And one of the things that I find helpful is sometimes to block out part of an object, such as this doorway, where I'm blocking out the step, which is a very similar value, to help me see the actual proportion of the door, and then to add the step to that. Notice I'm also establishing my horizontal line, which isn't the same as ground level because the ground level slopes slowly down to the right. So having got the door done, this now sets me up to take measurements from it. You are watching this at actual drawing speed. So this is the speed. Notice how far back I'm holding my pen, how far back my fingers are from the end. And I'm trying to line up the bottom of this window, both with how far down the door it comes, but also the distance above that white bit of rendering at ground level. And then I'm also measuring from the window to the wall. And then I'm also measuring from the door to the downpipe, noticing what a relatively small distance that is, and it's much thinner than the gap between the door and the window on the other side. So then I add that white strip to the top, and now we flip on the other side. So I'm doing my best to do the same distances now because this is symmetrical. So here I am now though, adding ground level, because visually that also impacts how we see something. And it does make a subtle difference. So now I want this to be the same distance. Notice the dots I place as positioning dots. And when I've placed the dot, I'm imagining now the window going through that dot and looking back at my reference thinking, does that look about right? Should the dot be to the left or the right? And it's the same with the wall at the end. So now I have the full width. And now let me show you a little trick which can be very convenient when we're drawing a scene such as this, and if we're not sure of the proportions, particularly early on. Sometimes when we're perhaps only been in it for a couple of minutes, less than 3 minutes in this case, it might be good to check if our proportions are correct before we go on and add a lot more detail and spend a lot more time creating certain effects. It can be helpful to check how accurate are we. So here I am, scrap of paper, and just to help me work out what's what. And now I just slide it across. Now this works because I'm trying to draw the actual size. And it's not perfect, but in my book, it's certainly close enough. And we can also do that vertically as well, but I don't have any vertical yet really to do. So now I'm confident though that my horizontal proportions are correct. So that lets me go up confidently. Again, notice how far back I'm holding my pen. It's a 0.2 uni pen. Now, these horizontal lines, they're not meant to line up with the windows. They're just giving me a sense of now how far down my horizontal lines come. But I am noticing that the windows on the upper floor come in slightly more than they do on the lower floor. And now I'm trying to work out how high I have to go. So while the widths are decided by what I've already done, I need to establish the heights, which I do partly by building upwards with the various elements, in this case the windows, but also just by eyeballing the overall size, the overall shape. And I need to be aware as well that my pen has a width that the edges in the reference that I'm drawing don't have. So I do a line for the corner in the wall where the window goes back. But that takes up basically no space at all in the photo, but it's going to take, in this case, 0.2 of a millimeter. And those all add up the more lines we do in that direction, in this case vertically. So I need to spread that difference throughout all the vertical lines or all the horizontal lines if we're going upwards instead. Now, got a little bit messed up there, but what I'm confident of is that I can disguise that in the finished drawing, or at least I could if I were going to finish this drawing, because I'd be doing some hatching to represent the reflections that we see and the shadows that we see behind the windows. Being aware of how we can, or if we can, disguise things that perhaps aren't quite right when we draw with ink is a really important skill to develop, a really important way of thinking, because in a sense we're always looking for possibilities to improve our drawing, and hiding, making less obvious any marks that aren't in the right place is obviously a good way of doing that. So now we've got this roofline section, and I want to keep this fairly straightforward. It's a very plain facade, so these little fancy bits add a nice little architectural decoration, but I don't want them to feel overdone or do too much detail. I want the line work to blend in with everything else. And there's actually 3 of these because there's one in the middle as well. And then we also have the downpipe collection from the gutter. And so this rather prominent downpipe goes straight down the center of the facade. Please hit the like button if you're finding this interesting, and of course this reference photo will be on my channel community page if you'd like to have a go at capturing the proportions of this rather elegant colonial building in Sydney that has fortunately survived all the redevelopment that has happened elsewhere in Sydney. So now you can see me aligning with what I've already done. We can align vertically and horizontally by referencing what's in the photo and then what we've drawn already. It's interesting, those lines of the roofing edge, now in life we know that they're going uphill. If we moved further back or looked side on, it would clearly be angled quite steeply, but because of where we're looking, those lines actually go downhill. It's one of those little optical illusions or counterintuitive elements with angles and perspective that sometimes, because of the position we view something from, the line we draw goes in the opposite direction to what we know is happening. And so these uphill lines actually go downhill. And as in yesterday's video on drawing downhill streetscapes, when the street is actually going downhill, the line we have to draw is going to be going uphill. A very important thing to realize, because otherwise we can start to draw what we think we know rather than what we can actually see. So I'm not really going to develop this a huge amount more, but I did want to put some hatching in for the doorways, because that does very much affect what we see and how we see. So a couple of minutes now of that. So please hit that like button for me if you haven't already, and if you've never tried drawing directly in ink, it's a tremendously, I think, liberating way to draw, because we have to disconnect from the fear of making mistakes, which was partly why I started drawing directly in pen in the first place. It lets us just go with it and have fun and not be so precious about every mark. I found that when I was drawing with pencil, I got to the stage, ironically, the better I became at drawing, the more accurate I became, the fussier I became, that it had to be more accurate, that it really had to be perfect. And I found I was erasing lines that I would have left earlier simply because I could see more quickly, more easily, that they weren't as perfect as they could have been. And sometimes I felt my drawings were more in reverse gear than forwards gear. Whereas drawing with ink, it makes me appreciate the fact that the drawing comes from all the marks, all the lines combined together at the end. I'm just checking my vertical proportions, not because I can do anything about it, because it's good to know how I've gone. This is me marking my work to see if my assessments have been accurate. And if they're not, I can look at my drawing and think, oh, can I see that now? Can I see that everything's too close or too far apart, or it's too high for the width or too wide for the height? Can I see that? Because being able to see it in our drawing in relation to our photo is the start of being able to change it. And of course, I didn't have to draw this actual size. I could have used the same principles of observation to increase everything a little bit by a quarter the height and a quarter the width, and finished up with a drawing that was a quarter as wide and a quarter again as high, a quarter as wide again and a quarter as high again. So there are ways, we can do this. It's not just drawing same size, but because drawing same size is the easiest way to go about it in terms of understanding and being able to draw in proportion, I think that it's the best way for beginners to start seriously practicing proportion. And there's no point, if the element that we're practicing in the exercise is proportion, worrying too much about drawing all the detail. I'm better off having 5 different drawings where I can just work on the proportion than doing one drawing where I spend all this time on other details. It's always good to focus on a particular skill for a certain series of drawings. What do you think? Are you going to have a go? I hope you do. There's a link to the photo in the description. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, proportions continue to be a big issue for people, and I can understand why, but they're nothing to be afraid of, and we can all work at them. And I have some other videos on proportions as well. So why not have a go? But whatever you draw and however the proportions work out, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time.